Hi, this is Mike Brakey. This is Black Swan Climate Theory, the June edition. This is part 3 of 6, where we address a statement in an email from NOAA's Derek Arndt when he wrote, "In this old data set, the year 1913 was particularly problematic, resulting from a keen transcription error from many years ago that is now corrected. 1913 is often held up as evidence of tampering, when in fact it is probably one of the biggest improvements in the data set and brings our value much more in line with what was observed at the time." Well, in the next few minutes, we're going to address the statement by Mr. Arndt. Here is the data and the link to the data on the main site. And in my opinion, it is a treasure trove of accurate raw data going all the way back to 1893. Now, the time in question, 1913, we see that based on the footnotes for the information provided below, which is month by month for each of the years, 1913 climate data was intact and was very accurate at 7,243.3 heating degree days. Remember, the more heating degree days you have, it results in saying that you needed more heating, and so that the overall temperature was lower. So if we continue with this, we see 1913 was not one of the colder years. 1913 was a warmer than average year for this time period. Here's an example of cold. Just recently, February 20th, 2015, the Lewiston Sun Journal had noticed that the Penobscot Bay had frozen over, and old timers were still reminiscing about this and talking about it, the years in which this occurred. And 1913 was not one of the years this occurred. We took the data from Lewiston, Auburn, and set up graphs, and we looked at literature on what transpired over that time, and it ended up, we found essentially repeated validation of the Lewiston historical data. So let's get back to Derek Arndt's comments. What we have here is at the 7,243 heating degree days actually looks realistic and reasonable. 1913 was indeed warmer than the average back then. We see this on several support factors too. For instance, the Pacific Ocean in 1913, it had gone from blue to red for a short period of time. Even though we were in the middle of a cooling period with the Atlantic, you see a spike here where around 1913 and 14, there may have been some volcanic action somewhere. The key thing is temperatures rose, and this was reflected in what was seen in the data for 1913 here in Maine. For some reason, NOAA did not like the warm 1913 year and wanted to change it with their, I believe, their 2011 algorithm. But they screwed up and made it even worse by reducing heating degree days by 10% as opposed to raising it by 10%. So if they say there was major flaws in the data, it was their cooking of the temperatures that created the problem in the first place. And once I had read this from Arndt, I started doing some research and found that there was a study by another gentleman in Zone 13, which is just north of Lewiston, Auburn, where he was using Farmington data. And he was having the same complaint of what I've seen here. Huge variations in the data. In his study, and this is the link to the study, and it's titled "Data Set Changes Makes It Hard to tell the real story. And essentially, what he's indicated is that after the 2011 algorithm was applied, we see that the 1913 temperature jumped up to over 46 degrees, which made it the warmest year in the century, which has got to be very frustrating to NOAA since they want the present to be the warmest. After the 2014 algorithm was applied, then what happened is essentially they knocked down the temperature 5 degrees. The question is, why not stick with just the regular temperatures that existed at the time? We had good heating degree days. Why make these manipulations? And we'll get into that a little later. So, here we are again. There's a statement by Mr. Arndt about 2013. Please note the solid black line located at the 100% represents the raw unadjusted data over the years before any quote-unquote improvements by NOAA. As seen in the chart to the right, it was very likely that NOAA key in error came from an earlier algorithm, the blue dotted line, that grossly inflated temperatures in 1913 by at least 2 degrees, as seen here. Reducing the heating degree days values by 10%, NOAA made 1913 appear 2 degrees warmer, the opposite of what I suspect their bosses had ordered them to do. So, what happened? Well, here we show what the temperature was in the Lewiston database. It was 7,243 heating degree days in 1913. The order came down from the mighty that they wanted to increase the heating degree days to 8,000 for reasons we'll discuss later. But they accidentally went the other direction and reduced it to 6,520, which resulted in making the weather look at least 2 degrees warmer than it was for that time period. So here's the dilemma they had for 2 years. So what do you do to correct it? NOAA 2014 algorithm, the red dotted line, had to more than offset this error in 2013 to promote a 4-degree cooling temperature. So they had to increase the next algorithm 22% to offset the 10% that was seen in the past. The present net global warming algorithm, noted by the solid green line you see here, shows the extent of manipulation of the basic raw climate data, which is the black line. When we get all the prior algorithms out of the way, we have the master algorithm here, at least for the moment. The master NOAA algorithm applied to all raw temperature data is to assure a global warming trend over 120 years. This NOAA algorithm assures colder temperatures records for the past. It appears the NOAA algorithm anticipates colder temperatures in the near future. NOAA is even biasing recent temperatures as colder to avoid any black swan events in the near future. So we see here, even with most recent data, they're tweaking it colder in their analysis. They'll call it an aberration or something, but to me, they're indicating they feel we are in global cooling, the powers to be, and they just can't let that information get out to the public. Heating degree days inflation created in prior decades assures the illusion of global warming in the present. Federal NOAA's strategy has to keep improvements simple. As I did this research, I checked the internet, and it's just, you'll see a slew of things like this. Climate theories crumble as data and experts suggest global cooling. These are the challenges that NOAA has. More recently, global cooling temperature data cooked in biggest science scandal. And more recently, scientists launched investigation of climate data adjustments. This will be submitted to that group in Europe, these presentations. So looking at the heating degree days, what I've also done is I've provided all the information. I've provided the raw data from Lewiston, Auburn, for all 120 years, the data from NOAA for 2013 and the data for NOAA for 2015, so we can see the discrepancies over time. I've also put in the percentages of change for each of these so that you can determine what the array algorithm is that's used by NOAA in their master model. All this information is presented here. So in bottom lines, if we were to look at the basic raw data as it is right now for what would be CD2 district, the southern interior corridor of Maine by NOAA, or our raw data, we'd see here are our actual heating degree days. The question is, what do unadjusted heating degree days look like after the master algorithm is applied? And bear in mind, if we see the numbers, the green go higher, it means more heating degree days, which means colder temperatures. And so we apply the algorithm, and here we go where we see much colder temperatures recorded in the earlier years, and as we work our way to the present, still tweaking colder but less significant, so it could be perceived as just an aberration and just a difference of opinion by people. But this is an elaborate setup to perpetuate the global warming theory. Is it just Maine? Well, let's take this a little bit further. I'm going to take Maine here, the raw data. I'm going to set up 2015 after the master algorithm is used. I'm going to set up the scales so they match each other. And again, what you see here is that the Maine climate 2015 is buried under higher heating degree days, whereas you can see it clearly here, which shows how much additional heating degree days has been added. In fact, we've done the calculations, and essentially heating degree days have been increased about 5%, a little over 5% for the 120 years, weighted towards the back end to sustain global cooling. Now the question would be, okay, this is Maine, and we've repeated this several times. Now, what's happening with United States? Well, again, I took and archived United States data at the same time I did this. There's the United States. I'm going to do the same procedure and align. And now the question is going to be, if they're using the same master algorithm on the United States as they did Maine, when I click advance, we should see the blue coming in, and the question is it going to cover up the U.S. climate 2015, since all the scales are the same? And is it going to be pretty much the same kind of ratios? And so we'll click, and here we go. And there we have the same situation where it indicates to me, and again, we're seeing potential fraud of about 5% increase in heating degree days weighted towards the back. Uh, this indicates to me that this is a master algorithm that's applied for pretty much all the states and regional and national. I don't know about out of state, out of country. Others would have to check that. And so with that, this is why I'll finish up by saying it's important to have unblended, untouched data if you're going to do any serious work on heating degree days. I do not trust NOAA. NOAA does a lot of brilliant things. My concern is there's certain people in power. They can tell some underlings, make this happen, make this change. We have to perpetuate the myth on global warming and modify the algorithm every couple of years to successfully promote this. And that is a major disservice, in my opinion, to all Americans. And with that, we'll end this section. The next will be part 4 of 6, main weather zones. We're going to get more specific on some of the things occurring in the main zone here in the way of temperatures. Thank you for listening.